My name is H.A. Goodman, and I'm an author, columnist, and journalist. Hit subscribe right now to this channel. We are growing. We're almost at 132,000 subs. We're on our way to 140,000. Check out my Second Amendment channel. I have some amazing uploads there. Fortnite and different firearms you see in video games. I'm doing a series on the real thing. And so you have M249, all different BAR, all of these different MP5, all of these different firearms on my Second Amendment channel. You could see, if you play video games, you could see them in real life on HA Second Amendment. My Federalist article below explains exactly how AOC's Green New Deal exploits indigenous communities around the world. Please check that out. That is just recently published in the Federalist, an amazing publication, and I'm very, very proud of that, how the Green New Deal would exploit poverty-stricken people across the globe. And just from the mining of cobalt and the mining of lithium, there's 5% U.S. car sales are now electric vehicles. If AOC wants, and the Democratic Party or progressives want up to 100% of car sales to be electric vehicles, you would see all the suffering, devastation, environmental pollution from radioactive cobalt mines, from polluted water, devastated communities regarding the lack of water from the mining of lithium. You would see all of this exponentially, this suffering exponentially increase, because if there's this much devastation now in the Congo, in Bolivia, in Chile, in Argentina, in China, from the mining of cobalt and lithium, which are two metals essential to car batteries functioning, then just imagine if it's 5% of U.S. car sales, electric vehicles, and all of this negative horrific human impact in the Congo and other regions of the world, in China. Imagine if that goes from 5% to 95%. You have even greater emphasis on mining those very difficult to acquire substances and metals that are the mining of which are associated with a devastating human cost, especially in the Congo. Please go ahead and share that below. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not hyperbole. So when I'm going to show you right now, it'll be below in the description. It's not hyperbole. 107,000 jobs. Okay? 107,000 jobs. From 10 to 20 years. 107 direct and indirect jobs AOC prevented in the Long Island City, Queens community, and in New York in general. So in all, the study estimates. So this is a study commissioned. Let's see. There's one from Cuomo, but this is does New York's Amazon math add up? State study relies on big assumption. So this is a Democrat and Chronicle USA Today article. Okay. They commissioned a study in New York to see what would take, how much economic benefit New Yorkers would obtain from Amazon moving. They're building a headquarters. And you have, ultimately, in all, the study estimates the Amazon headquarters would create more than 107,000 direct and indirect jobs and add $186 billion to the gross state product. The $27.5 billion in tax revenue was based on the assumption that 40,000 people would be hired, which, by the way, even Amazon said, yeah, they're going to start with 25,000 people, but the actual facility, the actual headquarters, would enable a lot more people, closer to 40,000 or over. That's even what one Amazon official was saying. They're aiming at far more than 25,000. And 40,000 within 10 to 15 years to 20 years is very feasible. Amazon's growing every year. It's not like you're not talking about like Snapchat or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. This isn't like an app that is just going to, it's like a fad or like a social media craze that'll eventually lose steam. This is Amazon. It's growing every year. Now, of course, there are negatives, but this is what she prevented. And then AOC and Democrats or progressive Democrats call this a victory. This is not a victory. This is not what Bernie Sanders was. By the way, really quickly, my challenge to the Humanist Report still is out there. If he wants to debate me anytime regarding President Trump being a great president, bringing home Americans from war, that's my pleasure. I saw on Twitter he declined, but then he called me a grifter. Just really quickly, grifter, a person who engages in petty or small-scale swindling. Let's see here. What does this say? So $2 million, and in May, TYT raised $2 million through a crowdfunding campaign in order to hire a dozen investigative journalists. How did that work out? $2 million. I didn't get $2 million from my viewers. I didn't get $2 million, and then they get $20 million from VC, venture capital funding. This is the get money out of politics. You get $20 million from venture capital, and you have the audacity to add $2 million from viewers? Are you kidding me? And then it's pumping the Trump-Russia myth, which, by the way, if you want to talk about TYT and Bernie Sanders himself, are the definition of grifters. And my value system remains constant. I wanted to bring home Americans from war when I was writing 100 articles in The Hill, The Huffington Post, and Salon. And The Washington Post called me the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters. And then hit pieces were written on me. They weren't written on anyone in the Young Turks or Kyle Kulinski or Mike Figueredo or anyone like that. So you want to talk about grifters? How many Medicare for All bills are there, Mr. Figueredo? How about 0? So when you know very well you couldn't defeat me in a debate, so you take a shot at me in one of your videos, and then on Twitter you say, oh yeah, he's a grifter. Where's the Medicare for All bill that you've been pontificating about? Why didn't AOC introduce a Medicare for All bill or champion Bernie's bill in 2017? Maybe because people on the left are grifters. The definition of the word. $2 million, according to the Washington Post, from crowdfunding for an organization that is the millennial outreach of the Democratic Party. Oh my goodness, and my ranting might be a little bit too verbose, but anyway, so be careful of the words you use because they might pertain directly to you and the organization that you've latched onto for your own personal gain. Anyway, TYT is known for being that definition by everyone, left and right. Anyway, like I said, Bernie Sanders wanted to initially bring home Americans from war, from counterinsurgency conflicts, from quagmires. That's one of the main reasons I loved Bernie. He was against the system. He actually wanted to break up too-big-to-fail banks to make capitalism work. Even Alan Greenspan wanted that. I'm all for that. Okay? But he opposed the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Trump did also. He wanted to bring home Americans. Trump is actually doing that. He wanted a foreign policy that was the antithesis of a neoconservative foreign policy. Trump has that. We have peace between North and South Korea, the beginning of. Prison reform, he signed. That's also progressive. So tell me how horrible Trump is. Of course you can't debate me, Mike. Of course you can't. What would you say? Would you be against Trump's prison reform? Would you be against bringing home Americans from conflict? Would you be against peace between North and South Korea? Would you be against 5.1 million jobs created in 2 years when Obama created 8.9 million and deported 2.5 million people and presided over the largest expansion of domestic oil and gas production? Of course, Kyle Kulinski and Figueredo and anyone on the Young Turks couldn't And they certainly couldn't defend $2 million in crowdfunding. They couldn't crowdfunding after you get 20 million or before you get 20 million in VC funding. Anyway, but I digress. Speaking of grifters, let's get back to 107,000 jobs. 107,000 jobs. You're talking about everything from food trucks to construction workers. You're talking about everything. That's jank now. You're talking about everything from food trucks to construction workers to retail chains to mom and pop restaurants to janitorial services to everything that is associated to unionized workers as well. It takes a lot to construct a gigantic facility in New York. There's a lot of work that goes into the construction, a lot of work. And you would have, like this article in USA Today states, 107,000 direct and indirect jobs overall. Now, initially, you would have 40,000 people working at 150,000. The average salary is 150,000. The median in the area near AOC's district, which she led the charge against Amazon, but the Long Island City has a population of 172,000. Median income is $56,201 a year. $56,201. The average salary is $150,000. Now, that would be for 40,000 people employed, which is realistic. $27.5 billion. Now, they initially promised 25,000 people employed. But 40,000 people in 15 to 20 years directly employed by Amazon, not the 107,000 indirectly and directly. 40,000 people. The state's estimate that Amazon newly planned Queens headquarters would bring $27.5 billion in new tax revenues based on the tech giant hiring 40,000 people. But let's say you divide that by 2. Well, let's just say it's around 13 billion for 25,000 workers. Or less than that. That's still good. That's still good. A little over 13 billion. Okay, that would still be good. 13 to 14 to 15 billion dollars as opposed to 27.5 billion. So if they only added 25,000 employees, you're looking at around 13 to 15 billion dollars. If my estimates are correct. Still though, let's just say it's 10 billion. For the money for AOC's for AOC's political vision to be implemented, you have to have tax revenue. She's actually ensuring that her political vision is not implemented. That's $27.5 billion in tax revenue, and they would have hired 40,000 employees because it's New York, it's Amazon, and Amazon of 2019 is not going to be the Amazon of 2030 or 2040. This company is a Microsoft type, Apple type company. Facebook, Twitter, they'll be MySpace. Twitter's not going to be around forever. It's a cauldron of dangerous, insidious nonsense. It's an echo chamber for the left. That's why I left. That's why I'm not there anymore. That's why I deleted my Twitter account. If you see anybody on Twitter with my name on, it's not. I have accounts that pretend to be me. It's not me. I am not on Twitter. But Twitter's not going to be around. Amazon will be around. The findings were significant, helping to justify $3 billion in taxpayer subsidies. So this is the thing. Yeah, you got to give them incentive to come into the area. That's not a bad thing. The study estimates $14 billion in new tax revenue alone over the next 25 years, separate from New York City's estimate of $13.5 billion in new city revenue. So either way you look at it, you're assured of at least $14 billion in tax revenue, aside from the $13.5 billion in New York City's estimate. So, how is this a win? Then AOC actually quoted a Newsweek article that uses words like alleged and rumors. The bodily fluids in a bottle for people in the warehouse who didn't want to go to the restroom, that was a rumor. There's no evidence of that in the actual article. Or at least they preface it by saying alleged. And by the way, are you altering Amazon? Are you ensuring that your critique of Amazon is correlated to some kind of legislation? Are you forcing them to treat their workers better? No. All you've done, if you're the progressive left Democrats, all you've done is, not only push the Trump-Russia myth, not only embolden the same intelligence community officials that are criminals, that covered up the fact that Clinton committed crimes and cheated Bernie Sanders and transferred top-secret intelligence out of the Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communication System, which is what James Comey said himself. 22 top-secret emails, special access program intelligence. He stated that himself. Outside the United States government, which is the Espionage Act, and U.S. Code 793F states that even if you do it unintentionally, you still get indicted. So all of this is just basically to cover up for Clinton's crimes and fabricate Trump-Russia, which, by the way, Beto O'Rourke and, the wonderful Young Turks do all the time. And then there's no, you want to talk about grifters, zero evidence of Trump-Russia. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders was cheated. And he doesn't even have the courage to say, hey, yeah, I was cheated and Russia had nothing to do with it. Debbie Wasserman Schultz did. But anyway, that's a whole other story. You've done nothing. You've done nothing to fight the oligarchy. You've done nothing to improve the lives of citizens in New York City who are earning $56,000 a year median income, and that's not a lot for New York. New York is the most expensive city in the U.S., one of the most expensive, if not, I think maybe Tokyo and New York, two most expensive cities in the world. You have hurt Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has actually hurt the citizens of New York. With 107,000 jobs lost that would have been, you're talking about direct and indirect, in economies like an ecosystem. You have a whole bunch of symbiotic relationships. You have construction on this massive Amazon building or headquarters, and then all the food trucks, all the restaurants, all the dry cleaners, all the shoe repair, all the whatever. Just think of if you have a massive project, economic development, all the different mom and pop stores you would need, or vendors you would need. How have you benefited? How have you benefited your constituents? You have not. You have not. And so by focusing only on 40, the study pushes to higher. So 40,000 jobs is very feasible. He noted, Robert Mujica, Cuomo's budget director. This is not like Cuomo's budget director defended the decision to only examine the high end of Amazon's deal, arguing that Amazon's build-out schedule suggests the company will exceed 25,000 jobs. He noted that Amazon would get less than the full $3 billion in incentives if they don't exceed. So they wouldn't even get the $3 billion that AOC is talking about in terms of tax breaks if they didn't exceed the 25,000 jobs. So they had incentive to get to 40,000. And they would have anyway because they're growing. If you look at the amount of square footage they're talking about, the 8 million square feet, that's actually scaled for 40,000 jobs. They actually built. They were building a headquarters to employ 40,000 people. 8 million square feet. You have really hurt the oligarchy this time, AOC. 8 million square feet. Says right here in this article. And Cuomo is upset. They're all upset. And then you have a handful of people who say, oh, well, we showed them. What did you show them? What did Amazon learn from this? That progressive politics has become just statements that are empty statements. Medicare for all. Great. Where's the bill? We have a resolution in a Green New Deal that would rely on mining 35,000 children, one estimate, in one giant cobalt mine in the Congo, where there's zero work safety conditions, zero safety standards, and people are inhaling this just carcinogenic dust from the cobalt mines because some are radioactive. And then there's a whole lot of other health risks. And the indigenous communities are not being paid what they deserve, whether it's in the Congo or it's in countries that mine lithium. And I quote the articles that talk about that, how Apple and Tesla and all of these companies rely on mining companies that exploit the indigenous communities. This is not, okay, the original Bernie Sanders, quote-unquote, revolution, whatever it was, had nothing to do with this, whatever this is that Bernie Sanders and, all of these people who latched on to Bernie when it was convenient. Nothing to do with 2016. This is a completely new type of thing, only utilized to funnel progressive votes back into the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders, well, first of all, he is a phony. He said he was going to fight the system. He did. Trump actually is fighting the system. You ever wonder why John Brennan and James Clapper don't ever bring up Bernie? They know he's part of the team. You ever wonder why Comey and Strzok and Page and all of them, and even Bernie Sanders, and yes, even the Young Turks, are they all funneled and worked towards one goal, electing Hillary Clinton? They're not the system, whether you can make up euphemisms and then pretend that Hillary Clinton didn't refer to black youth as super predators, which she did. And all of these things, you could talk about the crime bill, you could talk about everything, Iraq, everything. At the end of the day, it's Trump who is bringing home Americans, who is opposing corrupt intelligence officials. It's Trump who's presiding over an economy where there's more people working than, in a 2-year span, President Trump has created 5.1 million jobs. These are facts that nobody at the Young Turks could disagree with because they're facts. 5.1 million jobs, 8.9 million in 8 years of Obama. At one point, there were more jobs. This was a couple months back. There were more jobs than people to fill them. Wages are up. He signed a crime bill, which was a progressive policy objective. So tell us, but he's linked to this euphemism. Yeah, that euphemism is linked more to Hillary Clinton. So of course nobody would want to debate me. What could they debate? The left is like a dumpster fire of hypocrisy and preaching. The last people I would ask to give me guidance on anything are pundits on the left or politicians on the left like Bernie, who got in bed with the same people who cheated him and reinforced and bolstered the same system that he claimed to oppose. AOC, whose Green New Deal relies on exploiting indigenous communities in the Congo and in Chile and Argentina, Bolivia, and China, which is what I explained in my Federalist article. Or progressive pundits who don't want to debate somebody that they know would defeat them in a debate. Because there's no way to... I already know their shtick. I know their Achilles heel. They rely on preaching. And then I would ask, well, where's the Medicare for All bill? Why hasn't... If it's feasible economically, and if it's moral, and if people are actually dying... Humanist Report and Kyle Kulinski and Secular Talking, everybody at the Young Turks, then why didn't AOC push a bill? I explained that in RT's Crosstalk, my appearance. Because she's obviously either... Who knows why? Maybe she knows very well it's not feasible. Maybe she's just using it to get votes. Who knows? But if you say that people are dying without Medicare for All, and then it's going into March now, and you still don't have a Medicare for All bill, then what does that say about you? Talk about grifter. Talk about grift. The people, I say this with love. If you actually look at these people, these pundits on the left, and you believe anything out of their mouth, you're being deceived, constantly deceived. Just look at reality. Bernie Sanders was cheated by the same people who are utilizing these pundits and these politicians to funnel votes, funnel your belief in a Green New Deal, which ain't going to happen. We don't have the technology at this moment. I do agree that we need a Green New Deal, but it should be focused on developing technology. And that's different from saying, well, we need to invent things that's obvious. But if you focus on a massive effort to develop a battery that doesn't rely on cobalt and lithium, that would be a good thing, because then you don't destroy indigenous communities around the world. The same communities that you claim to protect, that claim to want to protect. So we don't have that. So the carbon footprint, the CO2 just generated from making an electric vehicle, combined with the human cost of mining cobalt and lithium, makes electric cars very bad for the environment, very bad for the planet. And that's only with 5% of car sales. But see, that's the thing. Whether it's this, you've done nothing to have Amazon change any of its work practices, if indeed they're not good for workers. You took 107,000 indirect and direct jobs away from people in Queens, in Long Island City, in New York, and then you claim victory. You couldn't find bigger imbeciles. You couldn't find people who have zero understanding of economics, who preach and preach. That's all they want to do is preach and preach. But I was on that side of the political divide. I know their Achilles heel. I see what they do. They pretend that they're so moral and righteous, and they work for one goal, to elect Clinton 2020 or another variation. The system is being torn apart more by Trump in a very positive way than by any of the preachers on the left, any of the preaching progressive pundits, or people like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who just takes 107,000 jobs away from people in her district. This is hilarious. And $27 billion in new tax revenue. $27 billion in tax revenue. And your entire existence in Congress is based on tax revenue. How does that happen? Only in today's progressive left could that even be a thing. Your entire political philosophy is based on tax revenue, and you reject $27.5 billion in Amazon tax revenue, and then you call it a victory. And then you call it a victory. And not one pundit on the left is focused on bringing Americans home from never-ending quagmires, back to their families, back to their children, back to their sons, their daughters, their wives, their husbands, their parents. Has Mike at Humanist talked about this? Does he even advocate this? Does he even say, hey, that's a good thing that Trump did? I think Kyle Kalinske said it was a good thing. I think that he did. I'm not sure. Has anyone on TYT, I could be wrong, do they commend Trump on bringing home Americans? Or do they say, oh my God, well, if he brings home Americans, then they parrot the same neoconservative philosophy that they espouse? Or do they just focus on one country? Gee, a Jewish country, a Jewish state. That's right. They focus on one country. And then they claim to oppose fascism. And then my article below in the Jerusalem Post talks about a lot of the progressive pundits. Why Democrats embrace anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias. That's below in the comment section. You're being duped. If you're on the left, you're still watching this channel. You're being duped by people who pretend to be morally superior while actively promoting the biggest imbeciles who have zero understanding of economics. Zero! They're happy! They are applauding 107,000 direct and indirect jobs. And then if they're like, oh, no, HA, it's not, well, then 40,000. No, it's not even 40, that's 25,000. Fine. Worst case scenario, they're applauding 25,000 jobs lost that could have been, or jobs that could have been within the community. But this is not from New York. Well, many of them would have been. I mean, who knows? Maybe all of them would have been. Maybe half of them would have been. Maybe a third. Doesn't matter. You would still stimulate the economy through the indirect jobs. But like I said, this report talks about 107,000 indirect jobs. The biggest grifters are the people who, through fundraising, get millions, and then through venture capital get tens of millions, and then pretend they want money out of politics. My God. And then they pretend that they love Bernie Sanders, but the Daily Beast never wrote about them. Why is that? I wonder why. Maybe they're not really a threat. Maybe the system relies on these people to funnel outrage back into the Democratic Party because Trump is this euphemistic monster. Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. AOC literally hurt her community, hurt New Yorkers, and you could talk about any negatives. Yes, of course, there would be negatives, but the positives would far outweigh the negatives. This was a monumental loss. And this is even worse than the embarrassment of a Green New Deal that nobody's inspired from and everyone is laughing at. And I explained in my Federalist article, relies on indigenous communities that she claims to care about and would decimate these communities if you go from 5% to 100% of electric car vehicle purchases because of the emphasis on mining, lithium and cobalt especially. Ladies and gentlemen, check out my Second Amendment channel, my Federalist article, my Jerusalem Post Daily Caller articles below. Share them on Twitter. The Federalist article is doing great. Check out also in the pinned comment all the different segments on HA Second Amendment, and my Patreon is below as well. Thank you so very much. 107,000 direct and indirect jobs. In all, the study estimates the Amazon headquarters would create more than 107,000 direct and indirect jobs, and add $186 billion to the gross state product. So you're looking at far more than $27 billion in tax revenue. In aggregate, you're looking at $100 billion, likely over $100 billion. No, yeah, at least 50 to 60 billion in tax revenue. Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. Thank you so very, very much. The link to the 107,000 jobs, indirect and direct, is below. Thank you.